Hello students, I am Dr. Gayatri, Assistant Professor at Smriti College of Pharmaceutical Education, Indore, from the Department of Pharmacology. In our series on anti-anginal drugs, in our previous class we have seen the pharmacology of first class of drugs, that are nitrates. In today's class we will look at the pharmacology of other classes of anti-anginal drugs. So coming to the next class of anti-anginal drugs, they are beta blockers. We have seen the pharmacology of beta blockers also when we were studying antihypertensive drugs. So all kinds of beta blockers are nearly equally effective in decreasing the frequency and severity of attacks and in increasing the exercise tolerance in classical angina. While looking at the treatment goals, we have seen that one of the goal is to make sure that the patient can go back to regular activities and also to reduce the frequency and severity of attacks. So those two goals can be achieved by using beta blockers. So this can be with both selective beta blockers as well as non-selective beta blockers. But with non-selective beta blockers there is a disadvantage. Non-selective beta blockers cause unopposed alpha receptor mediated coronary constriction. So because of this, coronary spasms are accentuated. So in vasospastic angina, that is variant angina, what happens? Vasospasms happen. So in such conditions, if coronary spasm also happens, then it aggravates the variant angina or it worsens variant angina. Because of that reason, it is safer to use selective, that is cardioselective beta blockers than the non-selective beta blockers. So examples of cardioselective agents are atenolol, metoprolol, etc. So long-term beta blocker therapy lowers the risk of sudden cardiac death among ischemic heart disease patients. So in angina pectoris, beta blockers should be taken on a regular basis. It is not like whenever there is an attack, only then beta blockers should be taken, or when need arises, beta blockers should be taken. It is not like that. Beta blockers should be taken on a regular basis in angina pectoris, and the dose should be individualized. So depending upon each patient's conditions, the dose of beta blockers in treatment of angina should be individualized. Apart from that, abrupt discontinuation after chronic use. So when a patient is on beta blockers for a long period of time and then the patient suddenly abruptly discontinues these beta blockers, it precipitates severe attacks, severe angina attacks, or it might even lead to myocardial infarction. For that reason, abrupt discontinuation of beta blockers should not be done. Instead, the patient should gradually discontinue. If a need arises to discontinue beta blocker, it should be done gradually. Coming to unstable angina or non-ST elevation myocardial infarction, and unless it is contraindicated in a particular patient, beta blockers are most often used in treatment of unstable angina or non-ST elevation MI. So apart from that, they should be given only after starting nitrate or calcium channel blockers or both to counteract the coronary vasospasm. So if they are present. So if a patient is already having vasospasms, such patient should be started first with nitrate or calcium channel blocker or both, and only then a beta blocker should be added to the therapy. And beta blockers reduce myocardial oxygen demand and afford additional benefit by reducing the risk of impending myocardial infarction or sudden cardiac death. So they reduce the oxygen demand. When we were looking at how basically the anti-anginal drugs act, we have seen that they either act by reducing the demand or by increasing the supply. So beta blockers reduce the oxygen demand, and because of which a risk of myocardial infarction or sudden cardiac death is reduced. So mechanism of action of beta blockers, they act by reducing cardiac work and oxygen consumption, because of which heart rate is reduced, inotropic state and mean blood pressure are also reduced. And when a patient is at rest, these are at a marginal level, but when patient is in exercise or activity or in an anxious state, that is anxiety state, this anti-adrenergic action on heart results in increase in cardiac work. So what happens, the anti-adrenergic action of beta blockers on heart limits the increase in cardiac work that occurs. So when a patient is in exercise or anxious states and all, the cardiac work of the patient obviously increases. So what beta blockers do in such conditions is they limit that increase. So this is the mechanism of action of beta blockers. So coming to the next class of anti-anginal drugs, they are calcium channel blockers. We have also seen detailed pharmacology of each class of calcium, subclass of calcium channel blockers while learning about antihypertensive drugs. So in this class we will only briefly look at how they act in angina. So they interfere with calcium movement into the cell. This we have seen in the previous class. There are three subclasses: phenylalkylamines, example of which is verapamil, dihydropyridines, that is nifedipine, and hydrophilic benzothiazepine, that is diltiazem. So dihydropyridines are most potent calcium channel blockers. We know that the mechanism of action of calcium channel blockers is they inhibit calcium mediated slow channel component of action potential in smooth or cardiac muscle cell. And the two most important actions of calcium channel blockers are smooth muscle relaxation and negative chronotropic, inotropic and dromotropic action on heart. So all these things we have already seen while studying about antihypertensive drugs: verapamil and its pharmacology, diltiazem and its pharmacology, nifedipine and its pharmacology, and the pharmacokinetics of these drugs. Coming to the next class of anti-anginal drugs, they are potassium channel openers. So from the name itself we can identify what their action is or where their action is. So the chemical and electrical gradients for potassium across the plasma membranes are in opposite direction. As such, depending upon the channel, this ion can move in either direction. Such movement is regulated by multiple types of potassium channels. So these potassium channels, like any other channel, it regulates the movement of one particular substance from one side to the other side. Potassium channels also regulate the movement of potassium ions. So these are voltage dependent potassium channels, ATP activated potassium channels, calcium activated potassium channels, receptor operated potassium channels, sodium activated potassium channels, cell volume sensitive potassium channels. These channels regulate potassium movement outward as well as inward and serve diverse functions and exhibit different sensitivity to drugs. So each of these channels either allow potassium movement outside the cell or inside the cell, and they have different functions, and each of them show different level of sensitivity to the drugs which are acting on these channels. So as such, potassium channel openers exhibit considerable diversity in action. So the drug, because the sensitivity level is different, so the action is also different. So coming to the mechanism of action, in an overview, these drugs act by opening ATP activated potassium channels in smooth muscles, and their prominent action is hyperpolarization and relaxation of vascular as well as visceral smooth muscles. So by opening the ATP activated potassium channels, they result in relaxation of smooth muscles or relaxation of vascular as well as visceral smooth muscles. So coming to the example of drug that comes under this class is nicorandil. So what nicorandil does is, it activates ATP sensitive potassium channels, which results in hyperpolarization of smooth muscle. The vasodilator action is partly antagonized by potassium channel blockers, that is glibenclamide. So, like nitrates, these also act as nitric oxide donor, because we know that what is the action of nitric oxide? It causes relaxation of blood vessels. So, and then arterial dilation is also coupled with venodilation. So, coronary flow is increased, dilation of both epicardial conducting vessels and deeper resistant vessels also has been demonstrated. The effects on contractility, cardiac contractility and conduction they are insignificant. And beneficial effects on angina frequency and exercise tolerance compared to nitrates and calcium channel blockers have been obtained in stable as well as vasospastic angina, in patients suffering from stable angina and vasospastic angina. In both the cases, the beneficial effects are seen. And coming to nicorandil, it is believed to exert a cardioprotective action by stimulating ischemic preconditioning, which is a result of activation of mitochondrial KATP channels. Coming to pharmacokinetics, nicorandil is well absorbed orally and it is almost completely metabolized in liver. It is excreted in urine and it exhibits biphasic elimination, in which there is an initial rapid phase of which T half is 1 hour and later slow phase, the T half of which is 12 hours. Coming to the side effects of nicorandil include flushing, palpitations, weakness, headache, dizziness, nausea and vomiting. Large painful ulcers in the mouth which heal on stopping the nicorandil have also been noted. And coming to while studying about nitrates, we have seen that tolerance occurs in patients taking to nitrates, but this effect is not seen in nicorandil, but instead it has a potential to interact with sildenafil. We have also seen this while studying about the nitrates. Dose of these drugs is 5 to 20 mg BD. And though nicorandil is an alternative anti-anginal drug, its efficacy and long-term effects are less well established. Therefore, it has failed to acquire wide acceptance. But it may be useful in resistant angina when combined with other drugs, and administered IV when it is administered intravenously during angioplasty for acute myocardial infarction, it is believed to improve the outcome.